The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. The final Music Weekly of 2024, the final Nerdcast Empire of 2024 comes on this December the 29th here in the U.S., December the 30th if you're listening over in Europe or in Asia, or wherever you might be tuned in, as we count down the last hours of 2024. And this week, we are looking at the music of December the 13th. We'll be doing that coming up in the second half of our show. And then at the very end, we'll be going into the vault where we talk about a couple of classic albums that you can check out. And it was an interesting week because, again, it seems like the offerings at the end of the year are a little thin, but we will find some good ones to talk about today on the Nerdcast Empire. Joining me in studio, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It is going all right. Yeah, not a whole lot of new releases for the week. Maybe about 2/3 of what we normally see. So, and among those, a lot of live albums, a lot of re-releases. So, yeah, not a whole lot to choose from compared to a normal week. But, you know, I think we found some good stuff and looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be, there's definitely something for everybody this week. Also, a couple of really good instrumental bands this week that were options to pick. And I typically stay away from them just because I do like the singing element. But if you're into instrumental groups, when I post the playlists of Mike's in the chat, you should definitely check them out because there were a couple that I really did enjoy. But we're going to see if my voice can make it through this episode of the Nerdcast Empire. A little rough starting off, but we will get into it here with our first news story of the day as we jump right in. And this is one that Mike brought to my attention yesterday, and we got a story from Blabbermouth kind of talking a little bit about it. And that is the news that Jeff Loomis and Van Williams are teasing the return of Nevermore with the quote, "A new chapter rises." And I'll paste the article from Blabbermouth. This was from a couple of days ago, but I know Mike has maybe a little more updated information on this story. But looks like in the year 2025 that we may be getting some more Nevermore. But like I said, I know you've got a little bit more on this story, but kind of fill people in on kind of why this is a big deal.
Yeah, so this is definitely a big deal for me. It jumped out on my radar pretty quickly when I saw it. Nevermore, obviously a band I've been into for a lot of years. They kind of formed out of the ashes of the band Sanctuary, which was a thrash metal band from Seattle. But yeah, I mean, they were running up until around 2010, 2011-ish when they broke up, mainly so Worrell Dane could go back and do another Sanctuary album. But he passed away in 2017, sadly, and you know, at that point in time, you just assumed we wouldn't see any more Nevermore. Sanctuary did continue on. I saw they had some tour dates all the way up to 2019, but I haven't seen anything else from them since, really. So I don't know if they're really active or what, but nothing from Nevermore. But yeah, I mean, we have Jeff Loomis and Van Williams now both on their social media posting this teaser video suggesting that they are bringing it back next year. And, you know, it always brings up the topic of how you feel about bands continuing on with the band when key member or members are no longer there. You know, it's hard to argue with this one. Jeff Loomis wrote the vast majority of the music for the band, even though Worrell Dane is the voice or was the voice of Nevermore and wrote the lyrics. It was still very much Jeff Loomis's thing too. And, you know, 7 years removed from this passing, you know, you can't really blame the guy for wanting to go back to this thing that he helped build.
I think, as we talked about this week off the air, I feel whatever you decide as a band or as individuals, I would completely support you. If you think that, you know, you think the example of Rush, where it's just like, that was the three of them, it has to be the three of them, and they've just basically decided after Neil Peart's passing that there's just not going to be any more Rush. I respect that. Totally understand that. At the same time, this is another opportunity where, you know, and, you know, Static X is another great example of that, where, you know, you do lose the front man. And, of course, yes, the front man, very important to a band and what you think of the band. But at the same time, if the members of that band decide, hey, we want to keep doing this, we want to keep moving forward, I respect that too, because you know, it's not necessarily fair to them that you just say, yep, you know, we can't go on, we're done. That's not really right. And like you said, it's one thing. It would be one thing if the front man was the only guy left in the band when he passed and everybody else had already gone their separate ways. Then it does feel maybe not quite as great. But like you said, with Jeff Loomis, this is as much his band as anybody else's. If he thinks, hey, it's time to resurrect this and bring in a new singer and let's make more cool stuff, I think that's all right too. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always a topic that's going to be on people's minds. There's always that next instance of this happening. Obviously, Linkin Park being a big example, too, where, they didn't go for someone that was like Chester Bennington. They went a totally different direction. And even though he kind of had more of a mid to high range vocal delivery, like it's still kind of out of left field to pick a woman to take over for his vocals. But again, it's your band. You can make whatever decision you want, and it's kind of interesting to see what Nevermore will do in regards to that. I did see in some random Facebook page that I've not been able to corroborate or confirm in any way, shape, or form that a man by the name of Eli Princeton is supposedly going to be the lead singer. This guy is the lead singer for a band, The Sacrificed, I believe it was, a Christian metal band from Florida. But more notably, I think maybe he's also a vocal coach and has tons of videos on YouTube talking about hybrid vocal training. Even has a video that will show you how to sing like Warrell Dane from Sanctuary. So that was from 9 years ago. So clearly this guy can sing. He knows his stuff. It'll also be interesting to see if Jim Shepard comes back on board because he was a longtime member of Nevermore and Sanctuary. I love Nevermore, so I'm excited to see what happens next.
Yeah, I think we'll know more probably in the next coming months. And you mentioned Linkin Park kind of going a totally different direction with a vocalist. You also think of a band like Journey who did not. They basically, we want somebody, originally Steve Algieri and then Ariel Pineda, I think's his name. Arnell, that's it. Knew I was going to get it eventually. They were basically Steve Perry sound-alikes.
Yeah.
So that's what they were looking for. But again, you also run the risk that if your new guy sounds too much like the old guy, like Queensryche, that's another example of that. That if he doesn't quite live up to your fans, now it feels like a tribute band instead of something new. So it's an interesting topic, and it's something that as these situations come up, we'll always kind of talk about. But interesting to see what the new Nevermore is going to sound like. And I would imagine if they're doing something in 2025, news may start trickling out fairly soon once we get into the new year. So we'll certainly keep an eye on that. A couple other news stories that were just kind of interesting to me, and we were going to talk a little bit about Anthrax, specifically Joey Belladonna, of course, famously exiled from Anthrax for a while in his career. And a story that I'll paste in the chat from Blabbermouth talks about he spent that time away in a horse barn. He worked in maintenance basically with his wife, cutting grass and doing all these sorts of things to kind of maybe in some part take his mind off of everything that happened with Anthrax. Of course, he would later come back to the band, but you think of this just legendary lead singer, maybe one of the, certainly on the list when you start listing the all-time great metal vocalist, Joey Belladonna is on that list. You show up at a horse farm and there's Joey Belladonna, like you should be on a stage singing, why are you here cutting the grass? But it was just a really fascinating story that just kind of jumped out at me.
I had this thought. It kind of reminds me of that, was it the George Strait movie, The Pure Country,
yes.
where they had all the crazy stage show and lights and he had to get away from it and he kind of lived like low key there for a while. Like I got to think it's something like that, right? Like you go from just the insanity of what it would have to have been like being the lead singer and at times maligned lead singer of Anthrax by your own band.
Yeah, which is crazy.
I would think, man, like you come off of that because in the article, he basically spells it out like this wasn't something planned. Like he didn't intend on leaving the band. He thought things were going great until you find out they aren't going great. It's clear and probably to a degree justifiable that I don't know if he's ever going to fully get over everything that's happened to him with the band because it even talks about even now when things are going well, like you never forget how you were treated all that time. And, you read more through the article and it kind of brings you back, because obviously I followed the band, especially like in the early 2010s-ish time when they were kind of jumping around between singers. Even a month before they brought him back, they were talking about how they preferred John Bush. Like, it's such a strange situation, and you hope now. I just recently was recommended a YouTube video from Metal Hammer with Scott Ian going over the 5 essential Anthrax songs, and in this video from 2 days ago, all the songs he picks are Joey Belladonna era songs, and he even talks about, because the last one he picked was "Fight 'Em Till You Can't" from Worship Music. And he talks about, them bringing Joey back in and how he felt hearing him sing that new material. And it was like one of the first times I recall him really showing like a certain level of respect to Belladonna. And I hope that's just how things are going to be moving forward. But their whole existence was a strange situation.
Yeah, it's so bizarre, and even you mentioned kind of still the hard feelings. I mean, even they ask him about being fired twice by Anthrax, and he does mention that there's still like this bitter vibe. Well, of course there's going to be how do you ever get over that? I mean, yeah, it's great that he's back with the band. I'm sure it's probably great for him to reconnect with the fans and enjoy singing these songs. But at the same time, you just have to wonder, well, I think it's going good, but am I going to come in tomorrow and they're going to be like, nah, we're going to get rid of you again. We're going to bring in some other dude to sing our songs now. And, that would be really, really hard. But I guess he's never going to have to worry about finding work, it sounds like, if he ever gets let go again. Yeah. This guy can clearly, he's not just a singer. He can mow your grass. He can take care of your horses. Like, clearly can do it all.
And I still contend that of the big 4 thrash bands, he's the best singer in all of them.
And probably not by a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah. And honestly, John Bush is probably the second best singer, weirdly enough.
Yeah, that's true.
I thought that was kind of interesting. I dug a little more into kind of the Anthrax story just in general in their Wikipedia, and it was kind of cool when they talked about getting rid of Belladonna. They auditioned new singers, and one of the ones that they auditioned was Mark Asagueda from Death Angel.
Oh.
Who I think he's also now singing for Kerry King's solo stuff. So that would have been an interesting fit, and probably even more in line with kind of the sound that Scott Ian talks about wanting to achieve with the words he was writing. Because that was a thing too, where the lyrics that he wrote, he just couldn't. It bothered him to hear them using Joey Belladonna's voice, almost like there was a certain lack of heaviness to Belladonna that for some reason just bothered him.
That's so weird. I mean, the whole thing is weird. Like, it's weird that you're writing lyrics for a singer that's not in your band, basically. Like, I have these lyrics, and they're for our band, but you can't sing these. Like,
just a shame you have to sing them.
Right. Like, can you imagine saying that? That's just so outrageous.
Yeah, it's a strange situation, but it worked out for the fans because I think it gave Anthrax even more of a differentiation between them and the other 3 big 4 bands. You kind of had them as like the more punk and hardcore sounding band, but with a really solid lead singer. And, the other bands, in large part, just kind of had de facto lead singers. They weren't singers. They were just the frontmen of the bands.
Yeah, they create the sound, but it's not like somebody you would put on the list of the great vocalists of metal. Anthrax is amazing. Seeing them in concert twice, they put on an amazing show. And, Megadeth will probably always be my number 1 as far as the big 4, but I think Anthrax is right there close just because their live show is just so amazing. Now, see Metallica next year, and that might totally change my mind about that because I haven't seen them yet. So, but yeah, Anthrax, the whole Anthrax story, very strange, but at the moment, still a band. Maybe we'll get some new music from them sometime in 2025. Cool. One band that we will be getting new music from in 2025, which is our last news tidbit of the week, is LA Guns. The announcement, Leopard Skin, will be released in early April 2025. It will be the first album from their reunion with Cleopatra Records. And then the plan will be touring on that record as well. I would additionally assume with their hits as well with that. But, obviously it's been many, many years since I saw LA Guns with, Poison and Rat and Great White. maybe one of the first concerts I ever went to.
Probably like 24, 25 years.
Yeah,
something like
probably.
That.
But they were great. Like, I really enjoyed them, so it's really exciting news to see them releasing something new.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime any of these bands who have been around this long are still out there doing it in some capacity, it's definitely a cool thing. It kind of ties in also to our topic about bands going on without original members, because, for the longest time, you can add this version of LA Guns, and you had Steve Riley's version of LA Guns, which eventually these guys, the Tracy Gunn's Phil Lewis version, got the rights to use the name just LA Guns, and sadly Steve Riley passed away not that long ago, but when you think of LA Guns, that's who you think about, Tracy Guns and Phil Lewis. Phil Lewis's vocals, and obviously Tracy Gunn's tremendous guitarist.
For sure.
And I think, they're one of those bands that their hits are among the best hit songs of that era. If people aren't familiar with them, you got to check out the album Cocked and Loaded from 1989. Tracks like Slap in the Face, Rip and Tear, Never Enough, Malaria, Ballad of Jane, Magdalene. Just really solid pop metal type music.
They wrote songs, or had songs written for them. I don't know who wrote all those songs, but they wrote songs that feel like could have been hits in any era. Maybe they would have maybe not sounded the same in a different era, but they were just well-constructed songs that you just feel like these are universal hit songs. They're not just, it's a hair song in a hair era, and that's why it was a hit. No, they actually feel like well-thought-out songs.
Quality hard rock.
Yeah, for sure. So I've always had a respect for those guys because of that, and look forward to seeing what this new album sounds like coming up in April, and I'm sure we will hear at least some of it because
they're another band that's had a stint on Frontiers Records.
Of course,
not surprisingly.
So, and of course, not surprisingly, we're going to talk about Frontiers Records very shortly once again. But that wraps up our news items. A couple quick reminders. Check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. Check out our Discord. It is linked in the chat here live on Twitch, which we are every Sunday night at 7 Eastern for our Music Weekly show, and most Thursdays at 7 Eastern as well. We'll be back this Thursday. Took last Thursday off. We are going to be doing our Best of Anime 2024 this Thursday, and now that I have completed a couple of anime, I feel like I can at least contribute something to the conversation. Mike has completed 70 shows this year. Maybe not quite that many, but
maybe half of that, but there's next year's goal.
But he's casted a wide net, so I feel like he's going to be able to really give you an idea depending on what genre of show you like. There's probably something out there he's had a chance to look in on. And I'm hoping to knock out a couple more shows before Thursday's show as well to be able to jump in. I did watch Oshinoko Season 2, which was certainly one of the bigger shows from 2024, so we'll talk about that. That'll be coming up Thursday, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. And then we'll be back next Sunday with another episode of Music Weekly, the first one of 2025, but we'll still be talking the music of 2024, specifically December the 20th. Hoping there's a little bit more of a list next week. We'll see.
Otherwise, we might need to stack the last 2 weeks of December into one episode.
We might. We'll have to see. Tune in to see if that ends up happening. But and again, coming up sometime in January, we will come back on a Thursday night and do our Best of Music 2024. But we wanted to get through all the weeks of December, so we have almost the full year. We are literally 6 weeks away from having done this for a full year.
Wow.
On this podcast. This is episode 46 of Music Weekly.
Makes sense.
We will be getting through. We've listened to almost everything that is worthy of being listened to in 2024, at least one song. So I feel like we'll be able to put out a pretty good best of list. That'll be coming up in the end, probably the last week or so of January. Stay tuned. We'll let you know when that's coming up. Time to get to our new music of December the 13th. Couple reminders. Number one, if you're listening on the podcast network, which means you're not here on Twitch live or on the VOD, or you're not on YouTube, the VOD, you won't get to hear the sound clips, the music clips. The best advice is to swing on over to our YouTube page or our Twitch page. You'll hear them there. You'll also see a link to Mike's playlist, which I will be pasting in the chat in just a second, and that will allow you to go through and check out everything that Mike has surveyed in a week. Basically goes through and he will create a list by using a couple of different sources of all the album releases for a given week. He'll pull a track from each one, put it on that YouTube playlist, and then we go through and pick a couple of new releases that we want to spotlight on this podcast. And it was a light week. I mean, both a light week and just new releases, and also there was a lot of a lot of stuff that maybe wasn't necessarily up our alley. There was also some instrumental stuff that was great, but we didn't really pick it. A lot of live stuff. I did end up picking one live album, but I just thought it was really outstanding. But it was kind of a challenging week. But having said that, we've got 4 great albums that we're going to talk about, and we'll let Mike kick things off first. And we were fittingly talking about Frontiers Records. Mike's going to jump in and get us started with his first band. Mike, what do you got for us?
Also worth mentioning when you mentioned live albums that we did also have the Halloween Live at Budokan.
Which we've already spotlighted, but yes, correct.
That came out on the 13th. Didn't pick it because this is a huge, multinational, brand that is Halloween. Figured we'll stick to maybe bands that are still on the rise or a little more under the radar than them. But
and we did endorse it, by talking about it as a news segment, though the day after or 2 days after it came out. It is 100%, Nerdcast Empire approved. Like, you should definitely buy it and pick it up.
Certified.
For sure. But yeah, we tend to stay away from the big releases, but we do like to mention them, especially if it's a band that is always on our radar, like Halloween is.
To some degree, we have to mention them, or else it just looks like we're blind to it.
That's exactly right.
You're talking about all this music and you failed to notice Halloween? Like, what's wrong with you?
Right.
But no, that is not the case. We know it's there.
Yep, for sure. But we have some other great options as well that people can check out.
So you mentioned Frontiers, and for my first pick, I am actually going with the Frontiers Records, a newbie, so to speak. Their first couple efforts were released on King Records. Now they've signed to Frontiers. This is the 3rd full-length album from the Japanese power metal band Illusion Force. The album is called Halfana.
I feel like some weeks I do need to leave you the Frontiers band and not pick them all myself. So this week I did decide to bypass this one, but these guys are really great, so it's definitely a good pick.
Yeah, this is maybe, I don't want to say out of the typical Frontiers wheelhouse, but it's definitely not AOR. It's definitely not a reunited band from the 80s or 90s. These guys are insane, just for lack of a better way to put it. It's like Metal Archives calls them power metal, but they're more just progressive, symphonic. They're everything. There's so much going on with this band. It's hard to really pin them down to a single genre. They're also a multinational band, not all Japanese. You have Jin Jian on vocals from Korea. You have the brothers Yuya and George Shiramaru on guitars. Ollie Bernstein from the United States on bass, and either Jade or Jade, depends on what you're going for, on drums. He's also Japanese, so it's really hard to know whether it was like, hey, Jade sounds like a cool name, or if that's actually just a Japanese pronounced name. Who knows?
Let us know in the comments.
Yeah, because I really just don't know, to be honest. On their website, they have a bio describing each member of the band, and it's not surprising that they really promote the technical ability of the members. It lists Jin Jion's super high-pitched voice, the high-speed twin guitars of the Shiramaru brothers, the American bassist Ollie Bernstein, who graduated from Berklee College of Music, and the up-and-coming technical drummer Jade. We'll go with that for now. But yeah, my first thoughts in getting into the album were like, man, there's a lot going on here. It demands your attention. There's just it's a very big sound. It's symphonic at times. It's heavy at times. It's catchy at times. It's always melodic, but you have some of the choruses that show the vocal range of the lead singer, just super ultra bombastic. One of the reviewers I read kind of compared it to like Ed Guy in their prime, where you kind of have the building verses leading into the huge chorus. It kind of has some of that going on. Maybe a bit much for some just regular metal fans. I think you kind of have to want something that feels like a giant production, and that's what this does. So if you're into that, if you're into just crazy musicianship, epic size sounds, this could be something for you. As you're going through it, it's funny, like the contrast between track 3, Miracle Superior, and track 4, The Serene Valley, almost makes you laugh, because track 3 was just so huge, and then you get into track 4, and it's just very calm, not metal-like. I compare it to like a band doing an ending theme for track 4 as opposed to like track 3 being the anime opening theme. Like there's just that contrast there, but both are really good. Another thing I thought was kind of weird, looking at the YouTube music listing for the album, you have one song that's like a 4-part thing. It's over 4 tracks called Hibari. There's part 1, A Lost Cantata, part 2, Whisper of the Eternity, part 3, Mobius, and part 4, Luminescent Galaxies. The play count on them, and I don't know if this is just an algorithm thing, but the play count's bizarre. Like, you have part 1 with 6.6 thousand plays. Part 2 and 3 each have like 300 plays. And then part 4 has 3,700. Like, how does that happen? It's almost like someone's just listening to random music and it's only feeding them part 1 and 4.
It's the only way it could happen, because I would think if you're listening, if you have it up like I have it up,
I'm listening to the whole thing front to back.
Right. Like, it just makes sense, especially if it's clear that they're connected. I want to see how they're connected.
And that just struck me as kind of odd. Anyway, standout tracks on the album include Kaleidoscopic, Halfana, Miracle Superior, Captain Number 5, and all the parts of Hibari. Honestly, though, you kind of have to listen to the whole thing to get a full appreciation for what they do, because it's so all over the place. The track that I did pick to listen to is the title track of the album, Halfana. It can't fully encapsulate their sound, but I think it's a good example.
Let's check that out right now. Illusion Force with the album Halfana. This is the second track off of that album, and it is the title track, Halfana. So let's listen to a little bit of that now. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like chaos to some degree, but somehow organized chaos, which I think is good. And I have not had the chance to listen to the whole album yet, but I'm interested in hearing the whole thing, because that track is just, it's on fire. It reminds me of, bands like Dragon Force, where it's just like, let's just see how far we can push this before it's no longer music. And, obviously the 4-part song is another, like, key. It's like, okay, these guys do have a progressive element to them as well when you're creating 4-part tracks, and the naming obviously as well. But I'm really kind of interested in hearing what the rest of this album sounds like. Yeah,
it's like that is like the most bombastic you're gonna get. Like, but there are other points where it's slow and melodic, almost like R&B-ish at times. One of the reviewers even compared to some of the parts of the album to being more like 50s and 60s music. It's just it's really impressive and much bigger than I was expecting when I started listening to it.
For sure. Definitely want to check that out again. Illusion Force, their new release, the first choice for Mike this week. As always, you have 2 picks on your list this week, and another one that's got a really great sound for pick number 2. What do you got for us?
Yeah, this one's a little more kind of straight up metal / power metal. It is the third full-length studio album from this band from the Netherlands. The band is called Reviver, and the album is Carnival of Chaos.
That's another one that should have more plays on YouTube Music. I was a little surprised to see the play count so low, because these guys got a great sound.
Yeah, these guys are just quality. There's no doubt about it. Band first formed in 1997 by guitarist Fred Mantell and Tom Heemskerk. It's kind of funny when you think about their name. I guess they got their name because even though they were forming a band in kind of the mid to late 90s, that was when grunge and post-grunge were kind of a big deal. They weren't into that kind of music. They instead were hoping for more of an 80s metal revival. So with that in mind, if they decided, hey, let's be the band that does bring 80s metal back to life, and we'll be Reviver. So there you go. Despite having some critical success in the early to mid-2000s, the band split up in 2006 due to some creative differences. In 2017, Fred and Tom met back up again and decided to reform the classic lineup of the band and get moving, and they have done that since. Current lineup's rounded out by Stefan Brederode on bass, Leon No on drums, and Michael Zandbergen on vocals. Band definitely gives you Judas Priest and maybe some Iced Earth vibes. If you like kind of that Rob Halford, Rupert Owens vocal delivery, then you're definitely going to enjoy it. The guitar work from the 2 founding members really stands out. So I think that's something that any metal fan can appreciate. Your enjoyment's really going to kind of hinge on whether you like the vocal delivery of Zandenbergen. I thought it's fine. I really enjoyed it. Standout tracks for this album include What's in Thy Command, Along the Crusade, Carnival of Chaos, Lost in the Shadows, and Return to Egypt. The track I did pick is the title track, not to be confused with the Gwar album or Gwar song, Carnival of Chaos, but that is the track I picked, Carnival of Chaos.
So let's check that out now. This is Reviver with their new release, Carnival of Chaos, and this is the title track, track number 4 of this album. Let's listen to a little bit of that here on the podcast. Couldn't get it all the way muted there. I don't know. It was like weird. Let's keep going. But you know, you definitely hear. I see the Ice Earth comparison for sure. There's definitely a vibe there. The guitars, I had to leave it running a little longer. Just the guitars were just outrageous, honestly. After the chorus,
you can definitely tell that's like a focal point of the group. That this is a group formed by the two guitarists.
But, I mean, the vocals are great. It does feel like a throwback. But, again, as we talk about a lot on this podcast, a throwback without sounding dated.
Yeah.
I think that's always the challenge when I want to bring back this era of music. Okay, well, how do you do that in a way that doesn't feel like you're just ripping songs from that era and everything comes off as being, like I said, almost a tribute and not something where you want it to sound fresh. But also have the elements of the old
You want
stuff.
your own sound, even if it's heavily inspired by what came before you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think they really nailed that there. So definitely check those guys out, Reviver, with their new release this week. I've got 2 picks, as always, as well. And I went a little bit more off the beaten path this week. And maybe I do tend to a lot of times stick with more of an AOR type choice, but a little bit different for both of these picks. And we're going to start off with an alternative metal band from Villarreal, Portugal. This is In We Fall with the track, or the album, I should say, Inner Self. And first off, shout out to those guys. They've already commented on our Facebook post, so we appreciate that. This band was founded in late 2022. Carlos Camero on guitar and Federico Lopez on drums basically talked about forming a band. They added Daniel Morera on vocals and guitar and Luis Almeida on bass guitar. And they call it an explosion of creative metal aesthetics was their term. So
sounds cool.
Sounds interesting. This is their debut album after just signing with Eclipse Records. So that's really exciting for these guys. I saw a review comparing them to Breaking Benjamin or Alter Bridge or Seven Dust. I can see that, but there are definitely more things working there. There's some grunge elements to these songs, also some heavy metal and even some progressive metal in there. There were some songs I even got a vibe of like old Stone Temple Pilots. When they talk about being alternative, it does kind of feel like that they've drawn some of their inspiration from maybe late 90s, early 2000s bands, but I really, really dig their sound. Standout tracks include Looking Inside, Silent War, Winter Shades, and the song we're going to listen to here, Road to Live, the opening track off of that album. So let's check this out now. This is In We Fall with their first release, Inner Self, and this is the opening track, Road to Live. So let's listen to a little bit of that now. why YouTube Music just decides sometimes it's just going to refresh right in the middle of the song. I'm not sure what is up with that. But that being said, like I said, just very, like I said, it's a little bit of grungy, a little bit of alternative, definitely throwback sound, but again, in a very fresh way. Your thoughts on these guys, Mike?
Yeah, I could definitely hear some like post-grunge elements to that, which is always a good thing. I mean, I feel like maybe we don't highlight bands that are inspired by that era of music all that often on the show, so it's always cool to find one that's worth mention. I think those guys fit right in with the bands you mentioned, and good stuff.
Yeah, definitely want to check out more from these guys. Looking forward to seeing them continue on again in We Fall with my first pick of this week. Second pick coming up is a band from the United States for once. We're actually staying right here in the good old US of A. This is a hard rock heavy metal band from Los Angeles, California. This is the band Wings of Steel with the live album Live in France. This band was formed in 2019 by vocalist Leo Undermark and guitarist Parker Halub, not sure which. This is a band that has a very new wave of British heavy metal sound to them. I feel like we've had a lot of those bands over the past few weeks, so always great to see another one. They released their first EP and full-length album back in 2022, and this is their first live album. And, you know, the challenge is, especially when you've got a band that's still kind of up and coming, is if you're going to release a live album, it better sound really good, and these guys did that. This is just a rocking album. What's interesting about these guys is that they deem themselves on their website independent heavy metal with no financial backing. In fact, they even solicit donations on their website to keep funding their band. They have a tip jar, which once I post the album, I'll actually post it in our chat as well. But kind of, you know, just listening to this and kind of hearing their story kind of makes me want to pick up their vinyls off of their Bandcamp page, because you can also get like the digital downloads as well. So that would be kind of cool. But again, for a live album, which, you know, live albums sometimes are hit and miss, I thought this was really good. Standout tracks include Fall in Line, She Cries, Storm Child, and Gates of Twilight, which is going to be the track we are going to listen to on the podcast. So let's check this out. This is the live album from Wings of Steel. The track is Gates of Twilight off of Live in France. So let's listen to a little bit of that now.
Oh yeah, you rock, Lil. Calling out at night, you long for the gates of twilight. The city, of beat and where chains can be broken at the side. Let's rise, people.
But yeah, I mean, just great sound, great vocals. I mean, again, you're going to do something live, it had better just knock it out of the park, and I think these guys did that. Your thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, it's a little worrying at first when you think your first introduction to a band is going to be a live album of theirs. That doesn't seem like the ideal way to find out and to hear them for the first time. But no, that album had a huge sound. It sounded really good. And I also think the business side of it is interesting, because, you know, we talk about that a lot, just how do you make money in the music industry nowadays, and to kind of see them doing it a little differently than some of the other bands, that's interesting stuff.
Yeah, and I would think, as good as this sounds, that maybe they won't have to solicit donations for very much longer. Maybe their music's actually going to prop them up, because this is really, like I said, I was really blown away with this live album. I thought, outside of Halloween, all the other live albums this week I thought were a notch or two behind these guys, and this is a band that's still relatively new at doing this, so kudos to them. Definitely check out Wings of Steel and their new live album, which I thought was really, really good. But that takes care of our new music for this week. It's time to get into the vault, where Mike and I will have some classic albums that you need to check out. Of course, each of us kind of going through a different way at the moment. Mike is going through the Wikipedia list of glam bands and going through the alphabet to pick a new band each week. And we are up to the letter S in this run through that. So, Mike, what do you have for us for the letter S?
Yeah, so the letter S, there were so many options. So many. I could have gone the easy way out and picked a band like Saigon Kick or Scorpions or Shotgun Messiah.
All great choices.
Yeah, Skid Row, Slaughter, Steelheart, Steel Panther, Striper, all on that list. All would be totally doable. Wouldn't have been a problem at all.
For sure.
I could have even went the more comical route and picked Paul Shortino after 2 weeks in a row, picking the Quiet Riot album with him on vocals, and then the Rough Cut album, obviously, which was his band. I could have gone that route and had, mandatory Paul Shortino for 3 weeks in a row, but I opted not to. The band I did pick was a band who I'd never listened to before, but I was familiar with their name more so because of the members who were in the band and ultimately went on to do other things. The band in question is Steeler, and this is their only album, their self-titled debut from 1983, Steeler.
It does beg the question if your next gimmick should be just choosing one of these guys that's been in every metal band and then like spotlighting all the bands they've been in. Like, here are all the bands of Joe Lynn Turner, or here are all the bands of Jeff Scott Soto. And
I was thinking that, or do like a 6 degrees of separation thing where like every band I pick, I have to pick a band that the members of that group was in and just keep moving it that way.
That'd be interesting. See how long it takes to get to a certain band. That would be like set a target band and then see take two bands and that would be maybe even on this list that are just, they could not be more different, and see if you can get from one to the other and how many weeks it takes you. That would
I mean, that's the thing is like I could have gone that way starting from here and ended up with like Wasp or Lion or Alcatraz.
Could have easily
Keel.
jumped. Yeah, for sure. But let's hear about Steeler.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, this is their debut and only album. The band lasted from 1981 to 1984, before ultimately dissolving when Ron Keel formed his own and more notable band of that era, Keel. The band caught my attention through the listing of titled bands due because of Ron Keel, and then also the lead guitarist in the band, who people may have heard of, Yngwie Malmsteen.
So ridiculous.
Yeah, Malmsteen would leave the band after the release of this album and join up with Alcatraz. And in the same year, would be featured on their debut album, No Parole from Rock and Roll. And by 1984, would also have a live album with that band and his own debut solo album, Rising Force. So that dude was ready to take off. And when you listen to this album, you can tell that. Listening to it feels like a debut album from a band who sounds like a band from the early 80s. Like, that's kind of what you'd expect, and that's what you get. In a lot of ways, it's kind of that precursor sound of more of the music that I'm into, kind of that mid-late 80s pop metal, hair metal type stuff. But it's still good. I mean, Ron Keel's vocals are fine. It's hard to not notice Malmsteen's work in it, though. His solos are just completely ridiculous at times. One track that stands out is the track Hot on Your Heels, which basically starts with like 3 minutes of just him going nuts on guitar. Like, it's a good song. The whole thing is good, the whole 6.5 minutes of it, but like the first half is just him. It's wild, but yeah, you could definitely tell he was destined for greatness at that point in time. Other standout tracks on the album include Cold Day in Hell, Backseat Driver, On the Rocks, Down to the Wire. If you like 80s rock, you're going to enjoy this. There's nothing to not like about it, but it was clear that these guys were just kind of priming themselves for bigger and better things, maybe.
Yeah, I can't even imagine, getting a bunch of people together. We're going to form this band, and in walks Yngwie Malmsteen. And it's just like, how did you, you get off on the wrong bus? Like, how did you end up here at this band meeting? Like, there's clearly something bigger and better down the road for you. And again, that's not taking anything away from the guys that are in this band who are all very talented in their own right. It's just, you're talking about a generational talent in Malmsteen with a bunch of guys who are all very good musicians. And it's almost not a fair match there. Now, having said that, I could be wrong, but I think when I looked up Steeler on Facebook earlier, that they just released a new song, I think, recently. That was from actually in November. This is Ron Keel released his first new Steeler song in over 40 years, Give Me Guitars or Give Me Death.
That's wild, considering there was also a new Keel album this year.
Yes. So evidently there's there's also some new Steelers. So maybe, because they're active, their Wikipedia, their Facebook page is active. So maybe we will get a Steeler tour. I don't know. Maybe would Malmsteen drop back in from that? Like,
I would love to know who all's involved with the new Steeler song. Honestly,
yeah, I didn't go as far as to look that up, but
clearly they're not updating the Wikipedia timely enough for that.
Somebody's got to get on it, guys. Keep this.
His personal stuff. Yeah, I mean they have the new Keel World album listed. That's fine, which I remember it.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's interesting. And again, always cool when you're doing these old bands to see that there's at least some activity still.
Yeah, for sure. But have not had a chance to listen to this yet, but I do, obviously, because of Malmsteen more than anything, I do want to go back and listen to this.
It's worth a listen. It's wild.
That's crazy that clearly he was getting there already, even back with Steelers. So Steeler, the self-titled album, the pick this week for Mike. We are moving on in my vault picks. Again, we started my vault gimmick many, many, many weeks ago back with we were picking a band or an album a year that was important or something that I really enjoyed. We started back with the year 1969 with the Chicago Transit Authority. It was Chicago's first album. And we have continued on. We are now up to 2010. And as I mentioned last week, I'd originally planned on cutting it off after 2010 and jumping into something else. But I think at this point, I'm just going to keep going until I just find a year that I can't find anything, and then we're going to jump into the next thing, which I believe is going to be Frontiers Records groups, and we're going to just pick one in the alphabet each week and pick some album kind of randomly like you're doing, and we'll see. But we're going to continue on for now. We're up to 2010, and because of the way we're doing it now, I've actually made a list of albums that I want to check out from 2010. Because I missed them the first time or didn't get a chance to. And it starts off with two albums from Avantasia, Angel of Babylon and The Wicked Symphony. Both came out the same day on April the 3rd, 2010. The Wicked Symphony of note because of the opening track, which is basically a three-way vocal duel between Tobias Sammet, Jorn Land, and Russell Allen. Of course, we've talked about Allen and Land with their great releases in the past. We may talk about them again because they're in the Frontiers, and they, but those are two albums I definitely want to check out. We'll get more thoughts, I'm sure, from you when we get to your section on those and a lot of these. A live album from Bad Religion, 30 Years Live, came out in 2010. We'll talk about Bad Religion again in a moment.
Has all of their songs on it. Takes them 30 minutes.
It's a 30-minute release, but 17 tracks on that album, recorded over a tour in 2010. Mostly in California, but obviously Bad Religion's great. We're going to talk about them again in a minute. Blind Guardians at the Edge of Time was released in 2010. That's another one I definitely want to check out.
Great album.
Had no doubt about that. One that I certainly have heard some off of this album was the album Audio Secrecy, the third studio album from Stone Sour. Mission Statement, Say You'll Haunt Me. Two of the big hits off of that album. Seven Centers, the 13th studio album from Helloween, came out in 2010. I just need to listen to all the Helloween stuff, honestly, but this is just another one to add to the list. So yeah, those were obviously the big ones that I missed, and like I said, we'll let Mike kind of expound upon some of those here in a moment. Some other albums of note. This is one from a couple from Japan. Quadrinity, the members' best selections, is a 4 CD set from L'Arc-en-Ciel, where each of the four members basically chose what songs were going to be on that CD. So, get Hyde's best, and Tetsuya's best, and Ken's best, and Yukihiro's best. And obviously, they're great. There's a lot of great songs on this 4 CD collection, but that came out in March of 2010. Porno Graffiti's Trigger came out in 2010. Songs like Anima Rosa was on that, as well as Koyoi Tsukiga Miezu Tomo. Just another great album from those guys. The two big albums for the year are sort of stuff that I listened to. The first one being The Dissonant of Man, the 15th studio album from Bad Religion. There's another one that's on my iPod even to this day, one that I listen through quite often. The whole album is great. There's some of my favorite Bad Religion songs on here. like Won't Somebody, The Devil in Stitches, The Pride and the Power, Wrong Way Kids, Meeting of the Minds, Cyanide, Turn Your Back on Me, Ad Hominem, Where the Fun Is, I Won't Say Anything. I mean, it's not a bad song on this album, but some of those are just ones that, regardless of whenever they come up on my iPod, I will stop and listen to them. It helps that they're all relatively short, but I, always listen to those when they come up. The album that ended up getting chosen for the vault, and then we'll kind of double back to some of these that I've already talked about, is Avenged Sevenfold's Nightmare. Mainly because I've already picked a Bad Religion one. I'm trying not to repeat as much as possible, and I've already done a little bit of, probably too much of that. But this was released on July 23rd, 2010. Just another great release from these guys. The singles off of this were, Nightmare, Welcome to the Family, So Far Away, Buried Alive. They were all over radio airplay. It was an award-winning album, won several of the Golden God Awards, was nominated for several of the Kerrang Awards, was nominated for Best Song of the Year, Buried Alive was, in Revolver Magazine. This is, to me, is these guys pretty much, if it's not at their best, very close to their very best, and an album that's enjoyable really from beginning to end, but definitely worth talking about. And picking this album from Avenged Sevenfold, Nightmare. Let's double back now because there's a lot of ground to cover. Let's start with the Avenged Sevenfold album. Your thoughts on Nightmare?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting choice, obviously, because, it was the first album they had without their drummer who had passed away. They brought in Mike Portnoy to do the drumming on the album, and, there was a lot of talk of how that would go. He's Mike Portnoy. He's not, not from an ability standpoint, but just he's not really a peer with these guys. It's something totally different.
Yeah.
But no, I thought the album was amazing. Welcome to the Family, still one of my favorite Avenged Sevenfold songs.
Yeah.
And what's kind of wild is I feel like this kind of marks an end of an era for them because I feel like everything they've released after has just been different. Mm-hmm. It's like you go from Nightmare 2010 to Hail to the King in 2013, which kind of felt like a style tribute to all of their favorite bands. Like you could go up and down the list of tracks and kind of guess what band they're emulating there. Like it didn't have that same feel as kind of that run of albums from Avenged Sevenfold between City of Evil and Nightmare, where they kind of had this sound that they were doing and then they stopped doing it and moved on. And they've not really moved back into that pocket. They've kept moving. Their most recent album, which has been fairly critically acclaimed, just sounds so different. And I'm more in tune with this era of the band. But yeah, I think this one is really kind of the end of that period of time for the band.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Not that anything they've done since then has been bad by any stretch, but it's just not caught my attention as far as this. I really enjoyed everything from here prior, with this being kind of the exclamation point on that. But again, never fault a band for wanting to continue to push themselves and do something different. And, if clearly they are, like you said, still getting critical acclaim, so good for them. But yeah, this is, if they said they were touring this whole album, like just going to do it beginning to end, I would want to buy tickets to see that live because that would be really awesome. But don't know if that'll ever happen. Let's double back to the Bad Religion album because that's another one I know that you're very high on. Thoughts on that one as well?
Yeah, I mean, just another solid Bad Religion album. Really not a whole lot else to mention on it. You pretty much listed the majority of the tracks, and they're all solid. Like, there's nothing you can really say about it. Like, I think a song like Won't Somebody and Someone to Believe are both just really, really good songs. It's just kind of just what Bad Religion does for the most part.
It's I don't want to say a simple formula, but it's a straightforward formula that works, and kudos to them. Obviously, there were a lot of your picks, I'm sure, that were listed in the albums I wanted to check out, let you run through those, and anything else I might have missed from 2010.
Well, kind of going back to the Wicked Symphony from Avantasia, obviously the opening track's really good, but man, Scales of Justice, which I think had Tim Ripper Owens on it, that's an amazing song. Klaus Meine on Dying for an Angel, really cool duet with him and Tobias Sammet, which you had to assume is like a hero of his. To get to sing a song with Klaus Meine, so cool. Blizzard on a Broken Mirror, another standout track. It's funny that I somehow missed out on Angel of Babylon, but I own Wicked Symphony, and I have since it came out, so I don't know where I dropped the ball on that one, but I'll be anxious to hear Angel of Babylon because I'm sure it's great too.
Well, the opening track of that album starts out with Jorn Land, Russell Allen, Michael Kiske, and Oliver Hartman singing with Tobias Sammet. So 9 minutes and 31 seconds. There's no way that can be bad.
That's got to be tremendous. Kind of some of the other albums that came out in 2010. We have Rob Zombie with Hellbilly Deluxe 2.
Good one.
Rob Zombie's an interesting one. I feel like when he sets out to write a really catchy song, I enjoy it. But so many of his albums have tracks that I'm not super interested in. As for Hellbilly Deluxe 2, you had Sick Bubblegum, What, and The Man Who Laughs, really good tracks. And, if you're really into his stuff, you'll probably enjoy the whole thing, but those are kind of the standouts for me. Another album that was, I don't want to say was better than I thought it would be, but based on their prior album, and that was probably 10 years before this one came out, I wasn't really sure what to expect from it, but it ended up being amazing, was Infestation from Rat.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely kind of a return to their roots and form, whereas their self-titled from the late 90s was more contemporary sounding. This felt straight up like it belonged with their classic albums. Songs like Eat Me Up Alive, Best of Me, Last Call, Lost Weekend. Just really good stuff and worth checking out if you liked the classic Rat albums.
Yeah, for sure. Those guys are awesome, and yeah, I kind of overlooked that when I was looking through the list. But that's another really great choice.
Yeah, you had mentioned the Blind Guardian album, At the Edge of Time. Amazing album. Again, like so many of these are. On that one, you got standout tracks like Sacred Worlds, Tanalorn, Ride into Obsession, Curse My Name, A Voice in the Dark. They're solid. Everything they release is good. There's not a whole lot else to say about it. A band that I was a little late to the party getting around to, but in probably the last 5 or 6 years, I've really grown to enjoy is the band Angra.
Yeah.
They released their album Aqua in 2010 with tracks like A Rising Thunder, Lease of Life, Spirit of the Air, Weakness of a Man. Maybe not one of their more heavy albums in some places, but the songwriting's just great. Songs super catchy. I could listen to this one anytime. Let's see. Another kind of classic band that released an album in 2010, Death Angel, released Relentless Retribution. Another band kind of not in the big four of thrash, but kind of in that next tier down if you wanted to list one, but really good stuff. Tracks like Relentless Revolution, not the same as the title of the album, which is kind of weird, but whatever. Claws In So Deep, River of Rapture, Opponent at Sides, just good thrash metal. You mentioned Halloween, Seven Sinners. Just another good Andy Darris era Halloween album. They're all good. They even the weaker ones are still quality. This one you have Where the Sinners Go, Are You Metal, Who is Mr. Madman, If a Mountain Could Talk, The Sage, the Fool, the Sinner. Just it's Halloween. What do you want? And a few that I caught from my iPod that weren't listed on the Wikipedia page. So, I didn't know about them initially, even though I own them. Danko Jones' Below the Belt came out in 2010. Just great Canadian hard rock band. Had really cool music videos for 3 of the songs off the album that had like Elijah Wood in them and Ralph Macchio. Just really kind of a cool thing. Songs like, I think, Bad Thoughts, Had Enough, Full of Regret. Check out the videos on YouTube. They're really cool. Gwar released Bloody Pit of Horror, which maybe not to the level of like a War Party or Beyond Hell, but you had tracks like Zombies March, Storm is Coming, Hail Genocide. Still classic Gwar. Another one which isn't really necessarily in the realm of metal, but a band that, due to my interest in video games, I've grown to really love over the years is the band The Megas. Mm-hmm. They released an EP, Spark to War, which was kind of the precursor to them doing their Mega Man 3 albums. Had numerous versions of the Sparkman theme, You Spark to War, as well as a cover of Corey Hart's Sunglasses at Night, which is... Their covers are really good. They do some off-the-wall ones. They have that. They have like an ELO cover on one of their albums. Good stuff. Definitely worth checking out. We mentioned the band earlier. That might be coming back next year. They're up to this point, their final album, The Obsidian Conspiracy from Nevermore, came out in 2010. You had songs like Your Poison Throne, Emptiness Unobstructed, Without Morals, The Day You Built the Wall. Maybe my favorite Nevermore album, which is probably crazy to say since it was their last and it isn't Enemies of Reality or This Godless Endeavor, but I think this one had just more accessible, I don't want to say hits because they weren't necessarily hits, but songs that could have been hits than some of the other albums did. Finally, a couple more. We have Poison Black of Rust and Bones. If you like kind of that gothic metal sound, this is definitely a band you would enjoy. Songs like Sun Shines Black, Buried Alive, Alone in the last song. And then finally, we have Solution 45, which was the band that started from the former lead singer of Scar Symmetry when he left Scar Symmetry. What I didn't realize at the time is there's also some guest vocals by Dark Tranquillity singer on this album, which is kind of wild. But really cool melodic death metal with really good clean vocals at times too. Christian Alvestom's one of the best singers out there. Albums for Eons Past. You got tracks like Gravitational Lensing, For Eons Past, Lethean Tears, and Clandestiny Now, which is one of the best like album closing songs out there. Just good stuff.
Yeah, that's a lot for 2010.
Yeah, it was a bigger year than I realized.
A lot of good stuff there. Hopefully something on there that you may want to check out from the year 2010. And I know I have an album already in mind for 2011, so we will definitely be continuing on with what I think was one of my favorite albums of the last couple decades. I have a copy of it in my car right now, so we will talk about that one coming up next week, but that is next week, and that means it is time for us to wrap up this week's edition of the Nerdcast Empire. Thank you to everybody who has joined us live or on the VOD, has shared our posts, join our Discord, all that good stuff that you can do that doesn't cost anything. We really appreciate it. It allows us to continue, hopefully, building this thing and continue to grow it into 2025, which is where we will be when we get to our next episode of the Nerdcast Empire on Thursday. It's a review of the Best of Anime 2024 coming up 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday night, and then we'll be back next Sunday with another episode of Music Weekly. It'll be the music from December the 20th. Fingers crossed that it is at least a week with a lot of releases. We'll see when Mike gets around to putting the list together this week. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of the podcast. Big thanks to everybody who has supported us throughout 2024. It's been a huge year. Next year is going to be even bigger and better. We're really looking forward to that. Hope everybody has a wonderful Christmas, New Year, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. Hopefully you enjoy it. Great time with family and friends. But that is going to wrap things up for this week's edition of Music Weekly. For Mike and everybody else involved with the Nerdcast Empire, I am Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.